Chapter 98, Tutoring Geto. It was Friday afternoon, and for the first time in months, there were no students still out on missions over the weekend. Now that everyone was safe and accounted for, Yaga would only have to be on call for emergencies. He was looking forward to sleeping in and finally getting a chance to relax and breathe. Instead of putting Gojo and Geto through another training session after lunch, he took them to the library to work on the academics they were struggling with. Geto's notebooks on vector mathematics and projectile calculations, practical math for sorcerers, were filled with his notes and equations, but over half the answers in his workbook were wrong. Gojo never finished the essay that was due on cultural sensitivity in exercising curses near shrines and cemeteries. The document saved on his laptop had his name at the top and an introductory sentence, nothing more. At the library, they took their seats across from each other, but Yaga shook his head and had Gojo sit at the other end of the long table. Geto dumped his backpack out at his end, and Gojo sat in his chair, tipping it to balance on the back 2 legs. These academics were tailored to benefit the work you do as sorcerers. Don't blow it off. Yaga looked at his watch. I'll check on you in a couple of hours. The library was quiet as a tomb after Yaga's heavy footsteps faded away. Gojo reluctantly took his laptop out and opened it. He glanced over at Geto, watching him flip through his workbook and frown at the answers he got wrong. Geto didn't look up, but he knew Gojo wasn't working. Yaga's gonna want to see what we've been doing all afternoon. At least do 1 paragraph. Gojo stared at the open document. Then he stood up and rolled his neck and shoulders. I'm gonna use the bathroom. He passed by Geto's seat and flicked his hair with his fingers, causing some tendrils to loosen and fall out of the bun. Geto snapped and rolled his eyes, but grinned at his retreating figure as Gojo wove through the rows of bookshelves, taking the long way around to the restrooms. Geto returned his attention to his work and tapped his pencil eraser against the table as he tried to make sense of the numbers on the page. He heard footsteps heading back his way, but it wasn't Gojo. Nanami dropped a stack of texts into the book return box and spotted Geto sitting alone. He sat across the table and set his bag down on the chair next to him. I didn't expect to see anyone here on a Friday afternoon, Nanami remarked. He smoothed his hair back and smiled. Geto set his pencil down. I flunked the geometry homework. Yaga wants me to redo it. He felt heat rise to his cheeks. Nanami was an expert at mathematics. If he asked to see Geto's homework, he'd be humiliated. Oh, that's one of my favorites. Want me to see if I can help? Nanami didn't wait for an answer. He got up and looked over Geto's shoulder at the problems he was working on, reaching for his pencil and opening the notebook to a fresh page. Neither of them looked up when Gojo returned. Nanami was busy sketching out a corridor on the paper and showing Geto how to calculate the trajectory of a curse rebounding off the walls. Gojo stood watching them for a moment before he took a seat, irritation setting in. He moved in fast, he thought, watching Nanami enthusiastically explaining the logistics as he drew diagram after diagram. Does he have to lean in so close? Geto relaxed in his seat, not quite following everything Nanami was saying, but his passion for mathematics was becoming obvious, and it amused him. Gojo noticed Geto's slight smile, and his chest tightened. A sarcastic remark sat at the end of his tongue, waiting to be spoken, to interrupt their study session, but Gojo talked himself down. Instead, he slumped in his chair and stared at his screen, slowly typing out words, then deleting them. He heard Geto laugh softly, and his eyes darted back to their end of the table. Nanami was handing the pencil back to Geto. Gojo couldn't help himself. Hey, Nanami. Any thoughts on cultural sensitivity and exercising curses near shrines and cemeteries? He asked, his voice loud and out of place in a library. Nanami stepped away from Geto and grabbed his book bag. Sorry, Gojo, you're on your own. I'm strictly a numbers man. He winked at Geto, turning to leave. Thanks, Nanami, Geto called after him. Nanami gave him a wave before sauntering away. Gojo narrowed his eyes at Nanami when he left. Geto bent over his workbook and started writing furiously before he forgot everything Nanami just went over with him. Gojo sulked silently but turned back to his computer. He managed to painfully eke out almost 3 paragraphs when Yaga came back to check in on them. Yaga scanned Gojo's essay first, giving him a barely passing grade, before explaining the importance of being mindful of local customs and traditions when being sent out on exercising missions. Yaga checked Geto's workbook and saw Nanami's familiar handwriting on the papers scattered across the table. Nanami's a whiz at math. He's a good tutor. Take advantage of him when he has time. Gojo snapped his laptop shut and stuffed it into his backpack. He stood up quickly, knocking his chair back onto the floor with a loud thud onto the carpet. Yaga and Geto stared at him as he righted the chair. Yaga took his sunglasses out of his pocket. "You're dismissed. Have a good weekend. Stay out of trouble." "Yes, Sensei," Geto said. Yaga didn't look back when he left the library. Gojo was suddenly at Geto's side, straightening up the papers, slightly frowning at Nanami's scribbles. Geto's fingers brushed his hand when he took the notes from him, and Gojo softened a little. This wasn't Geto's fault. Gojo was jealous, and rationally, there was no reason to be, but the feeling remained and irritated him, like a pebble in a shoe. They walked out of the library, backpacks slung over their shoulders. Gojo grabbed Geto's hand. Geto held it, but he tried to catch Gojo's eye. "Are you ready to announce it to the school? To the world?" "Yaga seems to think it will be looked at as a weakness," Geto pointed out, it being their relationship. They stopped outside the library doors, in the middle of the empty school hallway. Gojo squeezed Geto's hand before letting it go. "Can I at least post a sign on you that says, 'Private Property'?" Gojo tried to sound lighthearted. "Or, at least, 'Keep away'?" Geto scoffed. "That's not a flattering way to say I belong to you." They continued walking, Gojo wishing it was the kind of world where there were no consequences for reaching out for someone's hand, and being ashamed that even he wasn't strong enough to defy it. "Satoru, easy, easy." Geto gasped and pressed his hands against Gojo's chest. Gojo was grinding into him hard. Gojo softened his movements and stopped, leaning on his elbows. He pressed his forehead to Geto's. "Oh God, baby, I'm sorry. I'll stop," he panted. He gave Geto a breathy kiss on his lips. "But you don't have to stop. I didn't know you wanted it like that." "I'm a little sore from the other night," Geto admitted. "I don't want to hurt you." Gojo started to pull away. "No, Satoru, please don't stop. I just need you to be gentle." Geto wrapped his arms around Gojo's neck, not wanting to break their connection. Gojo pressed his hips down lightly. "How gentle? Like this?" Gojo murmured, moving inside Geto slower. "Just like that." Now that it didn't hurt as much, Geto relaxed and spread his legs wider, causing Gojo to sink deeper into him. "Oh God," Gojo moaned. "Don't come until I say so," Geto whispered, knowing Gojo liked the exchange of power in the bedroom, letting him call the shots when he wanted. They continued to make love slowly, deeply. Geto listened to the intensity of Gojo's moans, knowing he was close. "Suguru," Gojo said desperately. Geto breathed heavily but said nothing. "Suguru," Gojo pleaded. "Satoru, if I belong to you, then put your mark on me," Geto said, finally giving him permission. Gojo allowed himself to come, goosebumps prickling his skin as the warmth left his body. He pressed his face to Geto's as he trembled against him. Geto wrapped his arms tighter around Gojo. He felt Gojo's cum fill him up and trickle out. "You're mine, Suguru," Gojo said, voice catching. "Don't tell me. I know I'm yours," Geto thought as he held on to Gojo. "I feel your possession. Tell the world. Warn them, in case they try to tear us apart."